America just got economically stabbed again, and there's no denying it. So Moody's, the United States' last bastion of America's top-tier credit score, finally caved in and said they had to downgrade it due to rising debt and interest costs. Now Moody's has completed the triangle with all of the three major credit rating agencies downgrading U.S. debt. This means, for example, if you are holding on to $1,000 of debt issued by the United States, you are going to see that value drop down to, let's say, $995, $990, maybe even lower. This also means that the U.S. government has to incentivize selling more of this debt, which means they're going to offer higher yields. Countries like Japan, maybe even China, or just very large financial institutions in the United States and all over the world will start shorting U.S. debt even more to make it worth less, but pay higher yields. And then they buy that high yield debt at the expense of you, the American taxpayer. Now, don't get things twisted. The vast majority of America's debt is actually owned by Americans and American institutions like the Federal Reserve, mutual funds, U.S. holders of savings bonds, intergovernmental debt. So it's not like the world is going to hang us out to dry. It's just that we are going to keep borrowing from and paying interest to our own institutions at the expense of the little guy. Don't worry, the uber wealthy aren't going to be affected by this because they have a beautiful loophole, which I'm going to talk about pretty soon. And if things were going great in America, we could probably shrug it off. But this is happening at a time where we are even more vulnerable. The reason why it's so bad is because you, the taxpayer, now have another huge expense that's only going to get bigger, paying the interest off of our debt. Right now, America's debt is about $36 trillion, and we pay about $900 billion or a little bit less in the annual interest just for that debt. And how do we pay for that interest? Taxes and issuing more debt to pay off that debt. The reason why we have such high debt and such high interest is because we keep borrowing since our tax revenue isn't enough for government expenditures. And even though our tax revenue can't cover government expenditures, we keep giving huge tax cuts to the people who could actually afford to pay these taxes. Here's a crazy tax loophole nobody is telling you about. The government doesn't tax the multimillionaires or the billionaires as much as they should. Instead, they borrow what the tax revenue should have been from these people. They borrow it by issuing the treasuries. Okay, so stay with me here. The government, instead of taxing the very wealthy people, have borrowed trillions of dollars from them or their institutions. And then instead of these people paying the government is paying them interest for this debt. And then the government is paying them back in full. Let's make a better example. Imagine you are an American and you make $75,000 a year. Let's say the government takes out $25,000 of that income, but then pays back half of it, plus interest. That is what the uber wealthy are enjoying here. And part of the taxes that you have paid are the interest that the government pays to the wealthy people for borrowing the money that they should have been taxing. I'm not trying to be a negative Nelly for the American economy, but I just want to let you know what we are up against. First, the very wealthy are getting a huge tax cut, meaning that the United States is going to have to borrow a lot more, and that debt's going to be much more expensive. That means that you, the taxpayer, are going to be paying more in taxes towards a debt that you'll never really see the benefits of. Second, with these new trade deals, we are also getting trade barriers, which are going to lead to an increase in unemployment and overall harm to the American economy. The American energy industry is already starting to bleed heavily, and we are going to feel it in the coming months because of the production increases by OPEC and OPEC+. What's going to save the American economy won't be DOGE or budget cuts. They've even admitted they can't even do it with Social Security. One thing that would help would be raising taxes back to where they were in 2016. The only thing that can really save America is if we witness a huge economic explosion, which is possible. This was America's debt to GDP during World War II. It's 120%. Ours is about 125%. When the war ended, our economy exploded in a positive direction, and the amount of debt we held as a percentage of our economic output plummeted. How did we do this? Infrastructure investment in the hundreds of billions of dollars. We doubled the minimum wage, and we also skyrocketed our defense spending to the point where it was about 10% of our GDP. Right now, that number is at 3%. We have infrastructure development coming in that was passed by the Biden administration, so let's see how that goes. Defense spending is 100% on the table, especially with the growing threat of China. But when it comes to doubling the minimum wage, I have no idea how that's going to happen with a conservative president and a conservative Congress. The minimum wage was doubled at the time in 1950 when the unions were very strong, and they are a shadow of what they are today. Having strong worker representation is what allowed America to have such a strong middle class and the strongest economy in the history of the planet. And right now, our middle class grows weaker with every passing year. So sure, America can still be the wealthiest country in the world with the strongest economy, but it is going to be much more disparate, where there will be a very weak middle class, a huge majority of the population being lower middle class or working class or in poverty, with that tiny 1 to 5% upper crust that has the vast majority of the wealth, even more than today. And that likelihood becomes even more apparent with every dollar going up in the deficit, every dollar that we have to borrow, and every ounce of faith that is lost in the power of U.S. debt. I am the Geo Husar, and I want you to look up the people who condemned Biden for witnessing the downgrading of our debt under his administration. And I want to see, how are these people acting today? Thanks for watching.